for long. There'll be no more sobbing when he starts throbbing his own sweet song. Wake up, you sleepyheads, get up, get out of bed, cheer up, the sun is red, live, love, laugh and be happy. What if I've been blue, now I'm walking through fields of flowers.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Red Robin HeritageCast. And we're of course powered by Budget Size Auto Centre and 360 Chartered Accountants. In this edition, I'm delighted to be joined by a man who made 94 appearances for the Red and White, scoring 33 tries. He also returned to the club in a coaching capacity, and he's a firm fan's favourite. I know a lot of you are delighted to be hearing from this former Robin in the latest edition of the HeritageCast. So, introducing Mr. James Webster. How are you doing, James?
Yeah, good, Chris. Yourself?
I'm really good, thank you. And like I said previously, thank you so much for coming on. We've managed to speak to some, really big names. People have played a real key part in the history of Hull Kingston Rovers. Justin Morgan, Michael Dobson, Newton, from an era that you'll be familiar with, going back to the 80s with John Dorahay. Players who are synonymous with the club, and I've firmly put you in that bracket, James, because I think you played a pivotal role at a real crucial time for the club. And I suppose if you fast forward to where we are now, James, if what happened when you was at the club, if that hadn't happened, we dare say that would be the Robins would be challenging where they are now.
Well, first of all, it's fantastic to see how well the club are doing on and off the field. That is, very rarely do you have a club that's doing well on the pitch that isn't doing it off the pitch. And I think there've been some great changes and acquisitions to the club over the last probably 12 months. They seem to have been quite inventive and trying to change how they work and, new revenue streams and thinking forward. And, that's the way forward. It's funny we do this podcast today on quite a pivotal day for rugby league with the IMG meeting going on as well. But, the club are doing well. Willie Peters come in, he's done a fantastic job. I like the way they're playing. They all seem pretty fit and healthy, which seems to be a very big advantage at the moment in rugby league, with squad sizes being small. But, 𝐁𝐿 seem to be definitely one of the UK clubs that are on the rise. Yeah,
and long may that continue. So if we focus on you, James, and we go back to your early days in rugby league, growing up in Australia, of course playing for Balmain and Parramatta, and famously playing in Balmain's last ever game before they merged and they formed to create the West Tigers. How did you get into rugby league, and how did that love affair with the game start?
Born into it. All my family originally from the bush in Australia. My mum and dad from different country towns moved to the city, met in city, but we still have a lot of ties to the bush. My dad played, different systems back there, and he played for university, and my dad was, into, horse riding, and he was an extremely good platform diver. Believe it or not, nearly went to the Olympics for diving. So, we always played sport, and rugby league was, the sport around us. I played for my school. I think I started at the age of 5. Continued on ever since, right through to probably the day I finished.
Yeah, and when you look back, James, it's a difficult, I suppose, question to answer, but did you have sights on having a pro career in the game, or was you just playing for the love of the game and opportunities sort of presented themselves?
As a kid, that seems so far off, doesn't it? We had a massive backyard. If you live in Sydney in those days, we had compared to England, obviously, we had a massive backyard. We had a pool. We had areas where in winter it was a rugby league test match, and in summer it was a cricket test match. We played every single day. We had lights put in out the back so we could play at night. I was lucky I had my brother there who was, more than handy as an all-round sportsman. Sport revolved our life. We lived in a country which the climate allows you to do that, and we had very supportive parents that took us all over the country to play numerous sports. But it wasn't probably till I was 15 or 16 when the Super League war broke out in Australia that it got serious, and I had to pick between cricket and rugby, between which one I wanted to play, and I decided to go with the rugby, mainly because I probably saw a career path. There was plenty of money being thrown around at the time, and I signed a contract with 𝐵𝐴.
Yeah, and then early playing experience. I mean, to be playing sort of first grade rugby league at a relatively young age, I mean, must have been fantastic experiences. Like I said, you played in Balmain's final game before moving to Parramatta, but then early experiences of top level rugby league must have been so important to you.
Yeah, different system back there. 3 grades on one day. Under 21s or 3rd grade, then reserve grade, then 1st grade. I think I was 16 when I played my first open age game for Balmain in their 3rd grade. I don't feel bad saying I was absolutely shitting myself playing against men, and then you could actually play 3 grades in one day. Back then, you could sit on the bench for reserve grade, then play reserve grade, sit on the bench for 1st grade. And I probably got my first taste of 1st grade in trials when I was 17 or 18. I played reserve grade, which I thought was amazing, and I got pulled off at half time and sat on the bench and played 1st grade as well. So, those days were amazing. I got to experience with another ex-Robin, Mark O'Neill. I believe I was Mark's ball boy as a kid. We spent plenty of good times at Balmain, and it was great that he came over and played with us in Hull as well.
Yeah, and who were the players you aspired to be, and who were the players around you who sort of maybe helped guide you in them early days?
Well, as a kid, originally I was very, very young. I went for St. George, but only for a couple of years. And then, of course, I played in the Balmain area. Balmain was our club. Every person gets a free pass to go to a game as a kid if you play. So we used to sometimes play right behind the stadium. If you think of Craven Park, maybe St. Richard's or something like that, there was a ground there. And we used to just walk up the hill to Leichhardt Oval and, go with mum and dad, and we'd watch them. So I became a staunch Balmain supporter. That great era of, Brusher, Pearce, Elias, Roach, Sheridan. One of my highlights of my career, I actually played with Paul Sheridan towards the end of his career. A big one for me was Ellery Hanley when he came to play at the Tigers. Ellery Hanley is still considered to be like God in Australia. The impact he had, and to meet him and at some functions, and for him to actually know who I was amazed. That was one of my highlights, that Ellery Hanley. Not only did I get to meet him, but he actually knew who I was. So there was plenty of good players. I loved Peter Sterling. I remember Wayne Pearce's last game at Leichhardt Oval sold out. Played against Parramatta. Peter Sterling played in that. There was plenty of really good players that were like idols to kids back then, because we didn't get to see them as often. We didn't have paid television until I think 1995. So we only got to see them if you went to the game, or maybe 2 games a week were on television.
Yeah, wow. And you was at Parramatta for 3 years after signing from Balmain, and then probably a life-changing decision was presented to you with Harvey Howard getting in touch, I think, 2005, asking if you fancy coming over to East Hull to play rugby league. What stage in your career was you at, do you think, James, then? Because obviously you had a taste of top flight rugby league in Australia. You get an email from a club in the not in the top division in England, and was it something that you jumped at? Did it take a long time for you to consider?
Timing's everything in rugby league. I love Parramatta. It was the making of me as a player. Balmain was different. Balmain was a working class, amazing place, but Parramatta was like the Manchester United of rugby league at the time. Brian Smith was coaching. They had heaps of money. They made the grand final the year before I went there. They had an umpteen fantastic players, and Brian taught me so much. He taught me so much as a player. Had 3 great years there, off and on. I didn't play every week. We didn't do fantastically well, and they were looking to remodel their squad. I was actually halfway through the year talking to London. London offered me a contract to finish the season, but they wouldn't release me. Parramatta wouldn't release me at the time to go. So that finished. And then I was in Mexico, believe it or not. I was in Cancun, Mexico, when Harvey, I got an email. I went and checked my emails and asking if I'd like to come. And spoke to Brian, and obviously he'd spent some time in Holland. Said it's a great city, and he said you'd be silly not to go. So I came with only one suitcase because I thought I was only staying for a year, and it was a good decision.
Yeah, and if you look back, James, what was the selling points at that time? Was it a chance for you personally, just for new experiences, new lifestyle, the opportunity to play regular first team rugby, or was it the projects, I suppose, that Rovers might have been presenting to you at the time?
I think it was a project. I got offered a position to stay at Parramatta as like a captain coach of reserve grade, so you could still play first grade. Jason Taylor was the coach of reserve grade, but he needed to be away with first grade a lot. You travel a lot in Australia. Obviously, you're on a plane every probably 3 weeks, and that would have been a great opportunity. But I wouldn't have qualified after that year for a visa. So it was the only time I would have qualified for a visa. So if I didn't go then, I wouldn't have been able to go. So while I qualified for the visa, I decided I'd make the most of it. I came over maybe a year or 2 years before with my brother, and we did a trip for Europe, and we loved it. So I thought, while I was young enough, I didn't have any kids or partner or anything like that. So I thought, while I was able to do it, I might as well give it a go.
Yeah. So your first impressions, James, when you get off the plane, you rock up at Craven Park. What was your first impressions?
Interesting. Yeah, it wasn't. He had the speedway track and the dog track around it then, and it was extremely small pitch. I still remember it was a lovely sunny day as I got off Manchester Airport in the morning, but those sunny winter days in December are extremely cold, and I was absolutely, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I came through those doors at Manchester, and I was like, wow. But when I got to Craven Park, that was windy as hell. It was bin day, so it was rubbish everywhere. And it was a new experience, but that sort of things never really fazed me. I came here to have, a good time, but also play well. And I got straight into training, and, I enjoyed the boys.
Yeah, and talk about out of the fire into the frying pan. Harvey Howard not lasting too long during your initial start at the club, obviously suspended by the club at the time. You then departed the club, and you take on an even bigger role, coaching the side for a short space.
Yeah, well, Harvey was really good to me. He signed. I think, what Harvey maybe lacked sometimes as a coach, he was a very good recruiter. He recruited some really good players for that squad that went on to be, I think, pivotal players, for them to get promoted. I lived with Harvey for a while, and he really looked after me, showed me around. I enjoyed his company, and I was sad to see him go. But, as it happens in rugby league, one door closes, another one opens, and hammering away at Whitehaven, which was surprising to tell you the truth, was probably the reason. And we seemed to go on a good run, and I enjoyed that period, parts of it, and I hated parts of it too. So it was kind of good when Justin decided to come over.
Yeah, I suppose personally for you, James, I mean, still a young man, still finding your way in life, but you're taking on a lot of responsibility. Did you see yourself as a senior figure in the club and within the team at that time? Because obviously the club must have thought very highly of you to make you interim coach during that time.
I still remember the day I met Phil Lowe. He had a pub in Sproutley. He called me and he told me, and I was like, okay, then, well, fair enough. So Phil, he goes, you're going to coach the team? I think it was just for a week. And I said, okay, then no problem. Who's going to pick the team? He said, I was. I was like, what? I think I was 24, maybe 25. And it was difficult, especially being Australian coming over to England at the time. Some of the boys, as nice as they were, had a little bit of resentment because, we were considered to be full-time and earn more money, and they were working, and it did add some pressure. I'm sure some people were okay with it, and I'm sure some people, didn't like it. So it was meant to last for not a long period of time, but as you keep winning, they probably gave the club a little bit more time to find the right coach, and Justin had to wait to finish his deal in Toulouse, and it ended up being 3 months, I think. But I think everyone was over it by the time Justin came.
Yeah, and he definitely hit the ground running. His first 6 games, 6 wins from 6. And then we had the National Rail Cup final at Blackpool. defeating Castleford. I mean, was that the game where maybe you thought, you know what, there is something special here? There's obviously thousands of Rovers fans there, desperate for success after a pretty lean period after the 80s, and we'd been a club that had sort of yo-yoed without having much success, and then we finally get a trophy to lift, and we see a team who were performing at the top of their capabilities. Was it for you that time when you thought, do you know what, there is something special here?
Yeah, well, I thought there was probably something special before that. I loved my first year. You know, the club, you know, Neil and Paul Aiken and everyone to do with the club really looked after me. Supporters were fantastic. You know, there was the supporters club and the junior Robins and all those type of things. You interacted really well with the club. It was a real community club, much different than Australia, where it's like a big enterprise, so to speak. Yeah, to see so many people go to Blackpool and you know, the atmosphere of that two big clubs playing each other was a really good occasion, and you know, it was a small stepping stone on getting promoted. It wasn't the catalyst, I would say, but it raised the profile maybe of the club a little bit. But it also meant we probably lost Andy Raleigh because he got picked up, you know, because he was playing so well, and would have been good if we could keep him. But yeah, it was a great occasion. We enjoyed it. We partied hard. The boys, we had a good time. We had a good time after that. It was like a couple of days afterwards, which I found weird because it was mid-season. We don't have that in Australia. But, you know, we were young, and we certainly had a good time.
Yeah, and how did you cope with the pressure of selecting the side, managing the side through the game? You know, that's what people forget, I suppose, as well. It wasn't just picking the team, that you've also got your role within the team as well to focus on. So for someone who's you know, being chucked into a coaching role as well as a playing role, it must have been difficult for you to maybe do everything.
Yeah, horrible decision that week. I remember it came down to Dwayne Barker or Jimmy Walker, and Jimmy Walker is one of the fittest, nicest blokes who absolutely bled for whole KR. I love playing with Jimmy. I love being around Jimmy Walker, and he was playing out of his skin. Dwayne probably won't mind me saying this, probably wasn't going as good as his ability showed at the time. And I picked Dwayne simply because of the balance of the squad, of the different positions and what we needed. And that was hard. It was really hard as a player that someone had to play with week in, week out, to go to Jimmy and be honest with him and tell him I wasn't going to pick him. And I still remember it. It made me feel sick. It made me feel, you know, just uneasy, really, that I had to do it, but I had to do it. That was my job. And, you know, full credit to Jimmy, took it well. And, you know, Jimmy played some big minutes still for the rest of the year. And, you know, he was a very valuable member of our squad.
Yeah, and you left the club in a really good shape for when Justin Morgan did eventually come over from France. What were your first impressions of Justin? We've been fortunate to speak to him on the HeritageCast previously. He spoke of his love for Hull KR, and he just seems someone who's totally in tune with what the club needed to do at that time to get promotion, and he seemed very hungry, very driven, very determined to deliver success for the Robins.
Yeah, he was definitely hungry and driven. I played against Justin in Australia, so we knew each other socially to a point without being, I wouldn't say friends, and we didn't mix in the same circles, but we knew each other. I still remember the first day we properly met Justin was we went to York races with about 4 or 5 of us, and I think it was early in the week, and we're like, oh shit, you know, we're going to have a beer, or what's it going to be like? And he came back with 6 Fosters, and we're like, right, this bloke's going to be all right. I think he's going to be all right coach, this guy. So, you know, he transformed the club. He drove it. He was able to either he talked Neil into going full-time the next year, or Neil decided himself. I don't know which one, but which took a massive backing from himself. And he went out and he bought some really good players. We petered out at the end of 2005. We should have done better than we did. We got beaten by Halifax. Still remember that horrible feeling sitting in the change like we underachieved. But it was a blessing in disguise, because we would have got relegated the next year if we got promoted that year. So we were not ready. And next year gave us the platform to be able to compete in Super League. Yeah,
and what a fantastic season 2006 was. 30 appearances for you, James. I mean, some really memorable games that season, in particular the Challenge Cup quarter-final against Warrington, which led to the Challenge Cup semi-final, and it culminated in the game against Widnes at the end of the season, which ultimately led to Hull Kingston Rovers achieving promotion to Super League. But for you, that season, James, must have a lot of special memories.
A lot of special memories. You always have a bond with a team that you win something with, or build something with. And whenever I see those people in that team, it's like we saw each other yesterday. It was, such a fantastic time to be around the city. Hull were flying, Hull FC. I think they were in the grand final in 2006, and they won the Challenge Cup in 2005. So, we were trying to get there, and we were winning every week, and you could see more people turn up. And the first taste of it, I think, was Good Friday. I think it was against Leigh, and we had to wait for people to get in and delay the kickoff, and there was 4,500. And at that time, that was a big crowd for us, and it just shows that we were on the right way. And I really enjoyed that year. I enjoyed playing like Widnes, and I enjoyed playing Leigh. There was just some more competition and some better teams than the year before, and obviously the Challenge Cup run gave us another taste.
Yeah, and you only lost 2 games during that season, Leigh and Whitehaven. You beat Widnes in the qualifying final at Craven Park, which meant that you could go straight through to the grand final. Of course, Widnes having to play that extra game, and then the final at Warrington. For many Rovers fans, that is one of the highlights of supporting the club. It's something that's still fresh in the mind, although it happened, a decent time ago. Incredible scenes at the end of the game with people celebrating. Did you feel that season that it was almost meant to be, James? That things were just clicking, where you could only see Rovers getting promoted. There was almost no way that they couldn't.
No, because that's not how sport works. Sport isn't always fair. There's an element of luck involved as well, but there's also a hell of a lot of hard work that needs to go into it. You very rarely succeed in sport or anything unless you put a hell of a lot of hard work into it, and we did. We had some really good attributes to us. We wouldn't have lost a game that year unless we rested two teams towards the end of the year, which was smart, because we played a hell of a lot of footy. We had to play, because of the Challenge Cup, we had to play Sunday, Wednesday, Sunday a couple of times. I still remember that was a sick feeling going into that last game, in that, we've been such a good team all year, but it came down to one game, and we all know that's, we were playing a good team. Like, you look at, I think I went through, I don't think we had 100 first grade games in us, or Super League or NRL games, and I think Widnes just in their front row had nearly 1,000. So they were a highly experienced side with lots of good players. And it was going to be a tough game. But as always, we started well. We weren't the fittest team in the world, because we used to blow teams away a lot, and was a little bit nervous towards the end, but, we did enough early in that game.
Yeah, and that performance against Warrington in the Challenge Cup, I wonder if that stood you in good stead. The knockout rugby, when it is do or die. And obviously, Craven Park was absolutely rocking that game. Rovers winning 40 points to 36, and that is another game that people still talk about now, James. It's almost etched in people's memories.
My kids still watch it. Still got it home, and still get out and watch it.
Do they ask for it though, James, or do you just put it on to show them?
No, I don't watch, because I actually cringe now, because after coaching and the game's changed, I watch myself back and go, oh, that's poor. I really critique it, but what it was, a red hot day. We went in, I think, winning 25 games in a row or something. Like, Warrington were flying. Warrington beat all the big teams that year leading into that. And we went down, I think, 10 or 12 points twice in that game. But we just had a real positive attitude with that game. We just went out and attacked it. And blokes like Scotty Morrell and Ben 𝐀𝐭, Ben Fisher, like the pass by Ben Fisher to Jason Everton to score, that's as good as skill as you're going to see. And we had a real potent left edge as well with Michael Smith, and obviously Byron. Byron could finish as good as anyone at the time. So fantastic times. We had a great time. It was on Saturday, I think. We went and partied hard. Crown Pub was busy back then, and I think we ended up nearly sleeping in there. So it was a fantastic time.
Yeah, and I suppose that season as well, James, a little bit similar to what's happening with the club now. There seems to be a real bond between the supporters and the players, like you said. You know, after a game, you could quite easily see players in the pub afterwards celebrating. You know, people are able to converse, people are able to chat, and when you're trying to achieve success, I suppose you need to have as many things going your way as possible. And one of the keys to that is getting the supporters, the players, the club as one.
Yeah, look, Championship's a little bit easier in that you play every Sunday. So I used to love going up to the bar after a game and having a beer. Much more of a thing happens in the Championship than Super League because of short turnarounds and Friday nights and all that type of thing. But you're right. You know, I loved how the supporters I wouldn't say had a say in the club, but, you know, really bought into the club. There's a difference between a fan and a supporter. And, you know, I think 𝐁𝐿𝐾𝐽's strength them, and still is a strength, is that they have supporters, not fans. So some people go without a lot of things to support that club, and I don't think it's lost on the players. And it's good, you're right. I think at the moment they seem really happy. They seem invested in the club, and I think the people in the front office are doing a good job too, and then that they're allowing fans to feel like they're part of the club. And as I said, things are looking good for 𝐁𝐿𝐾. Yeah,
and he was pivotal to the Robins that season, James. You've already mentioned another player who was maybe equally important, Scotty Morrell. What an unbelievable character. Of course, 𝐁𝐿𝐾 legend. I've been fortunate enough to speak to him on the HeritageCast, and he is somebody who speaks very fondly of you, James, and the impact that you had on the side. But he's a bit of a crazy one.
I love Scotty. Love everything about him. I didn't just like going out with him sometimes because you know, some people are, when they drink, are fighters, some are lovers. Scotty used to get nude. That was his paycheck. He'd be in a pub, and the next minute he had no clothes on. So, you know, he was young. He was young then. He was 21. He played well above his age. Fantastic. Again, the club spent money on him. Like, they paid a transfer fee for him, $15,000, I think, at the time. And I just had a gel with him when we played. We just knew where we were. We didn't have any of this left and right stuff like you see a lot now. And we just had an ability to gel really well and play. You know, he's a tough kid. As you can see, where he went on to play so many games. He played multiple positions. It's just a shame he's put so much weight on since he's finished playing, I suppose.
Yeah, it is a shame, but yeah, like you said, he partied hard, so you could probably see why he's maybe why he has. But fantastic memories, and of course the Holy Grail Super League. We achieved that with that victory over Widnes. Going into that first Super League campaign, James, what were your expectations, and where did you think Rovers should be, or was it just totally about survival?
I don't know. We went away to Torremolinos, I think it was, for a pre-season camp. Again, you know, well funded by the club, and I think we're realistic. I think, like, after going through a lot of these things, and you talk about goal setting like that, and sometimes you think realistically, you know, they get lost as the season goes on. It's just a load of crap, really. It's something you do at the time, but we knew we weren't going to win the comp, but we knew I think we were better than just being strugglers as well. We bought some experience, didn't we? Vela and, you know, Mark O'Neill. And it was probably unheard of too that we kept so many people from our 2006 team. So we didn't feel like we're starting again. Chris Chester came, you know, what a player Chris Chester was for the club. So we weren't officers for that point. And, you know, Justin, you know, had some good ideas, and we trained well, and we all got on well, and the start was really important for us because we, you know, won 4 of our first 5 games. But we had a lot of players that wanted to make a career still, and a lot of people who weren't going on the way out, and I think that's important. A lot of teams that get promoted have to buy a lot of people that are winding down, but that wasn't our squad.
Yeah, and James, you said that when you signed for the Robins back in 2005, you didn't expect to be here that long. You only came with 1 suitcase. But once the club gets into Super League, obviously your career is developing for yourself as well. Was the interest from any other clubs, or was it firmly at Hull Kingston Rovers?
I didn't really talk. I had not probably 3 calls away for that first year. I could have went back to Parramatta. Brian rang me up and asked me to come back. And I really thought about it. I really thought about going. Tim Smith was there at the time, and Tim, we all know how talented Tim was, but how loose he was too off the pitch. And I think they were looking for someone to come mentor him a little bit. And I was really tempted of going back. It was probably the time when I was coaching, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know but stuck with it. I didn't really speak to too many other clubs ever, really. We got things done pretty easy. Like, I never really had a problem with Neil or Paul negotiating a contract, and relatively, I look back and I can't remember too many problems.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible, really, isn't it? A player playing in the National League, sort of refusing, turning down the chance to go back to the NRL, but you must have been enjoying your rugby league and probably enjoying the responsibility that's been handed to you. Yeah,
look, as I said, I knew if I went back to Parramatta, it was I just wasn't suited to that style of play. Plenty of players that come over here and good players, and just not suited. I wasn't big enough, fast enough there. It was just full of athletes. Why England, you could still play a bit of footy, and it was about people who, some people that were coming to the end of their career, like Davies at Cass. I remember watching him playing halfbacks, and Danny Orr and these type of people. They were making good careers because they were football players. They weren't big, strong athletes, which in Australia everyone has to be like that. So, I just thought I had an opportunity to play another 6-7 years somewhere, compared to probably just one. So that was probably the defining era.
Yeah. Well, thank God you did make that decision. In your debut Super League season, you missed only 4 games. Of course, some really memorable games during that season as well. 4 derbies, big games against Salford, and of course a 42-6 victory over Hull FC at the back end of the season. I suppose, like we said, when you came over from Australia, these were the big games that you probably wanted to be playing in. And not just playing in, James, but actually influencing and having a major role to play in them.
Yeah, look, my goal was always to be promoted, always. Whether or not I saw that out the next year or not, I still wanted to get promoted. And I think that first year bowing out the way I did in Halifax, I didn't stay around for the playoffs. No, I got out there, I went on holiday, and I still remember the date. 8th, I think it was 8th of October, that was the next date we got a chance to do it again. And really driven to get there. And then when we got there, I enjoyed the ride. It was fantastic. Again, some great games. Those whole derbies are special moments, and, all of them echoed well in my memory, and it's a fantastic occasion for the city. But, the Salford game was, just an amazing experience. So many people coming to watch us, and that cemented I think that probably kept us in Super League before we went on, obviously, and did a job at Hull a couple of weeks after.
Yeah, and particularly that game against Salford, away at their place, I think there was about 4,000 Hull KR fans there. How do you keep a cool head, a level head in games like that, so that you are able to still produce those moments of magic, them bits of skill that are needed at the crucial times?
Practice. You practice under pressure as much as you can, so you're ready to do it. If you're a marathon runner, you run as hard as you can for as long as you can. If you're a rugby league player, you play games and you do conditioning so that when you're tired, you're able to still think clearly and come up with hopefully the right decision. You don't always make the right ones, but hopefully you make more right ones than wrong ones. It was a really good. What an interesting ground. The old Willows was, change rooms like I've never seen. Like, I think I was the only person, me, Ben Fisher, the only people that didn't hit our head on the change rooms because we weren't tall enough. But you had to come through, the other team comes through your change rooms to get out. But the atmosphere that we created from our supporters on a Friday night too, to get all the way to Salford was, I probably still think, other than probably warming up in the derby, or maybe warming up at Warrington for the final, it was probably the loudest experience I've had when it comes to playing. Yeah,
and then just on that season, of course, 42 points, a 6 victory over over our bitter rivals. I suppose that was a real statement victory to say that Hull Kingston Rovers are here and we're here to stay.
Well, I don't know about a statement victory. It was more to do with the survival statement. You know, they were going good. I think they came in on 13 wins. You know, they were a really good side back then, Hull. You've been to challenging for all types of trophies, and they're on a great run. Peter Sharp had them playing really well, and we had a game plan that day of just making Willie Manu just make as many tackles as possible. And I watched back the game once and I thought, geez, like we were really methodical with it, but eventually it broke them down. It took a while. We got a couple of lucky tries in there, but we thought that could, you know, we could take some energy out into the back end of the game would be a chance. And you got to play to your strengths, and that's what we did. You know, we couldn't probably go with them toe to toe. Down the middle, they Carvel and Dowes and, you know, Richard Swain, they could probably outmuscle us a little bit. So we decided to play a little bit different that day.
Yeah, and then the following season, Rovers had stayed loyal to the players who got them promoted in 2006. But 2008, we started to see a little bit of a transition with some of the signings the club were making. People like Michael Dobson, Clint Newton coming in. Did you sense a bit of a change in maybe the culture or the atmosphere at the club with them trying to make these signings?
That's sport, you know. You stand still, you go backwards. You know, they bought some good players. You know, I think James Webster came as well. You know, Crossland came. You know, they bought some good players, and we went to Leeds early on. And we really went toe-to-toe with Leeds for a long period. I might have only got beaten by 2 or 4 points, and Leeds were the champions from the year before, and we took a great following yet again. And I thought, well, you know, this team's got a little bit about it. It was a stronger team than the year before, and you know, rightly so. So yeah, you know, that was always going to happen from the club. The longer you're in Super League, the more chance you have of recruiting players. Yeah,
and for you, James, you've been, you know, the mainstay of the club for a few years. Obviously, someone like Michael Dobson coming in, you know, challenges for positions, other players coming in. How did you deal with the competition for places?
Yeah, all right. You know, I wouldn't say Paul Cook came, and I enjoyed playing with Paul. You know, Paul was an extremely intelligent guy, really good player. I liked how Paul was different, both on the field and in his mentality about things. Honest guy who was willing to be different and say things. You know, I liked him. Can I go to the door quickly?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry.
Got it.
What were the odds of that?
Oh, it always happens. So yeah, so the competition for places and Paul Cook coming in and being a good foil for yourself.
Yeah, I enjoyed playing with Cookie. I wasn't probably playing the best I've ever played at the time, but you know, I still enjoyed it, and I thought I was going okay. Obviously, I hurt my shoulder against Leeds, and 2008, that was my last game.
Yeah, and what conversations were you having with the club at that time? Because I think, am I right in thinking that they told you that you wouldn't be offered a new deal at the end of the season?
No, we didn't have any conversations about what was happening at the end of the season. It was, I don't even know what time it was. Was it May? I hadn't had any conversations with the club as of yet. But I have to say, as I drove off in the ambulance after that game, I knew that was my last game. So it was a tough period for me, I'm not going to lie. Don't hold any grudges about it. It's professional sport. You've got to do the best for the club, not for the individual sometimes. And they went out and bought a really good player.
Yeah, and you say you knew it was your final game for Rovers. Is that for any particular reason, any particular person?
What do you mean?
Well, so you felt it was your last game for the club. Obviously, you've been enjoying a hugely successful time at the club. So it seems strange that that relationship between yourself and the club, or was it between yourself and individual?
Oh, no. It was nothing. It was like I was out of contract. I had a busted shoulder. I knew, I was going into hospital. I probably wouldn't play again that year. The situation the club was in is they would need a halfback and they would need to get one ASAP. No one's going to come for 6 weeks and then probably not going to sign a bloke who's 29 who's just busted his shoulder again. So I was realistic, as I said. It wasn't out of spite or anything like that. It was just that I was a realist and that I know how sport works. I know what needs to be done, and the club needed to go buy someone.
Yeah, and James, you played one more time that season. Ironically, it was against the Robins, but it was for that lot, James. How did that come about, and what are your emotions going into that game against Hull Kingston Rovers?
I was in Australia when they gave me a call. Actually, I went and did some of my physio back at Parramatta for my shoulder. They offered me a deal. I came. I was waiting for my passport to get rubber stamped by the government. Hull that year were absolutely terrible. Adam Dykes was there playing brilliantly when he played, but he only really played the Challenge Cup, so they got to the Challenge Cup final. And that was a brilliant experience to go with a team to the final. I enjoyed my time in Hull. They were really good to me. Still obviously very good friends with Rich Agar. I enjoyed it, but the club at the time was going through a massive transition. One, they had an aging squad that was extremely busted, and that game, I got my passport. I still remember I got my passport, or I got my citizenship ceremony maybe the Thursday before Wembley, and I did it and went down and made me eligible to play the next week. And I wasn't expecting to play, but because so many people pulled out after Wembley, they asked me to play. I wasn't overly keen to do it because I wasn't expecting to. It was the last game, and no one really cared on Hull's part. And I probably knew what was coming, but I owed it to the club. They've signed me when they probably didn't. So I went out and tried my best, but we were never going to win that game.
No, it must have been strange circumstances, but I suppose if you look at it, they're your new employer. They're the one who have brought you in. But the emotions around it, seeing the Hull Kingston Rovers supporters, and obviously it wasn't the warmest of welcomes for you, James, when you came out. There must have been a big mix of things going around in your head at the time.
Yeah, actually, I actually remember running over to the East Stand. I got a good clap, so I was. I think people understood I didn't choose to leave. I was out of necessity for both parties. I was hurt and they needed a player. So it wasn't like I rang Hull up and tried to negotiate my way out of Hull KR. So I think fans understood that, and I thought they gave me a reasonably, warm welcome, which I appreciated. Yes, I said, I tried my hardest for that game. I hadn't played for 20 odd weeks. And we were a struggling team, and Hull KR were definitely on the rise, and there's some good players and they were doing really well. So I'm happy I played the game in that, I owed it to Hull to do that. And it's just weird that it happened to be that particular ground on that particular day.
Yeah, and sticking with the derby, one game that you played in the red and white of Hull Kingston Rovers was the 11-10 victory at Craven Park. Probably one of the craziest games I've ever witnessed at Craven Park. The weather, I think we had every weather condition going during that 80 minutes of rugby league, and of course ice cool at the end to get the drop goal. Have you played in many stranger games in that one?
No, not weather-wise. Maybe one when I was last game at Leichhardt Oval when we played Parramatta. We absolutely poured, and we played in the water, basically like a swimming pool. But that was cold. It was cold. It was windy. The ice was stinging as you looked into it. I remember waiting for a kickoff, and you couldn't see really. it made it very hard. It's very hard playing at Craven Park. I know people really understand how difficult it is playing at Craven Park, and it's why so many teams come and fail. In that the wind really makes it difficult. It makes it difficult in so many different ways. But it was basically a hurricane really that was coming through with some ice coming as well. So it was a funny game.
Yeah, and then you finish your playing career with Widnes before going back to Hull FC as assistant. You took on coaching roles at Wakefield before leaving them, and then returning to Hull as the City of Hull Academy head coach. Obviously, a lot of controversy around that move at the time in terms of the academy being created and what it meant for both clubs. But for you personally, must have been an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I can fully understand why they gave it a go. How many Hull KR players have gone on to be outstanding internationals in the last 20 years? Not many. If you look at Wigan and Saints and Leeds, you look at Featherstone, the area of Featherstone, the amount of players that they have turned out. There has to be a reason why Hull in general, and I don't mean the people who have gone on and played 1 or 2 games, but I mean since ૐ𝐿 and maybe 𝐀𝐮𝐿 played some and Richard Horne before he got hurt to a point. How many have gone on? Now Hodgson it's over in Australia, but there's not many. Think how many people and what a big area it is. So they had to try something. You can't buy players now. It's people, supporters, as much as I love them, they've got to understand how hard it is to attract players to come to Hull because of the geographical restraints of it. It's not because of the areas and people don't like the areas, because most people have a wife, a girlfriend, and they have a job or kids. And to travel from Lancashire to Hull is an extremely big ask. So you've got to produce your own kids. So I can understand why they did it. And I can also understand at the end why they chose to pull it apart. So I don't begrudge them giving it a go, but I did enjoy my time that I was there. And a couple of kids have gone on to be decent footballers, but as seems to happen in Hull a lot, not a lot have gone on to be regular first grade players.
Yeah, and it wasn't long before you was back with first grade rugby league. Chris Chester received his marching orders from the club at 3 games into the season. You'll get the course, I guess, James, asking if you'll come in and be interim head coach. Was it an opportunity that you jumped at?
Yeah, look, it was mixed emotion. I felt sorry for Chris. I played with Chris, still good friends with Chris. Obviously JP Neal, whoever made that decision at the time. But Chris was good enough to understand that sport, and he didn't begrudge me, taking over. I fully understood what I was getting into. It was just for 1 year, and then I was going to become assistant after that. It was a tough year. It was a tough year for lots of different reasons. One that I learned a lot from. It's still enjoyable, but the system at the time it was different, and it was it was definitely challenging.
Yeah, and for you personally, James, did it take its toll on you? Because, like you said, it was a difficult season. It ultimately led to Hull KR getting relegated from Super League, and for someone who'd been, although you got vast experience in top flight rugby league, you'd been at the academy, to come in and take on such a prominent role and have I suppose all eyes on you for the decisions you make. How did you deal personally with that?
I learned a hell of a lot. Like you learn from your hard times more than your good times. I don't look at it as a failure. I look at it as a learning experience. As I said, it's very hard to buy players at that particular time. Hull KR were going through a transition. They bought some players. A lot of them probably coming towards the end of their career, didn't play a lot. A lot of money was tied up in certain positions. We didn't come last. So if you look at the system that is now, we wouldn't have got relegated because we didn't come last. In that playoff series, we got beaten by a point, 2 points, and then I think we got beaten by a drop goal twice or something like that. So we weren't far off. It was difficult to be relegated. It was difficult. I'm not going to lie. At the time, I took it very hard and personal, but as a professional sport, you've got to get straight back into it. And the next year, Tim came in, and I really enjoyed working with Tim.
Yeah, and like you said, James, I think we didn't finish bottom of Super League. Even in the playoff series, we looked pretty comfortable, but we just went into them 2 final games, and the margins are so small out there in top flight rugby league, professional sport, and almost like a toss of a coin. We lost two drop goals, once against Huddersfield and then, of course, against Salford. But even in that game against Salford, I spoke to Josh Mansalato and he said, why didn't I just dive on the player, concede a penalty, etc.? They're the margins that you're dealing with. And I suppose it's just the gravity of the defeat, which hurts the most. The fact that it's not just a game you've lost, it's the top flight status of the team. And when you looked around the players in the changing room, James, it must have been a very, very difficult and a very somber occasion for a lot of people.
Yeah, look, it was like it was a movie, to tell you the truth. It didn't feel real at the time. I blame myself a lot for it. I did at the time because I was in charge of it. We were 8 points up with 2 minutes to go. And you're probably thinking, you've got this done. If you look at that Salford team, though, how many of those players went on to be really, really good players? Like that, they were a very good team. If you look, we played against Leeds, we played against Huddersfield. Huddersfield were challenging for trophies not long after and before. That was a really strong bottom fours. It was a really strong competition. The gravity of the loss is what hurt. Some people say it was good for the club. Some people will say it wasn't. That's not for me to say, or I'm not sure if I can even work that out, to tell you the truth. But it hasn't seemed to hurt the club at this point in time. No,
and it was Tim 𝐁𝐮𝐝 was appointed not too long after. Of course, he was going to stay on as assistant. I wonder, how important was it for you, James, to go through that pain and that hurt to then galvanise you and the team and the rest of the squad and even the club in that 2017 season championship?
Yeah, I don't know if it galvanised the team too much in that, some stayed, some didn't, for lots of different reasons. Tim, vastly experienced coach, been there, done it before, got straight into it. We had a really good squad for that division. Again, we had to be promoted through the other system, not just through the system which is now. So we had to create a squad that could actually get promoted through those middle eights against Super League teams. So realistically, the year, I enjoyed the year, but it was a bit of a boring year, really, the whole way through until you got to the middle eights, because we just kept smashing everyone, and it was just waiting until we got to that period of time. And the boys did a really good job. They did a really good job. They were professional in how they did it. Again, the club recruited towards the back end and strengthened their squad, and we beat some good teams at the back end.
Yeah, and I suppose a different kind of pressure as well, because the expectation was fully on Hull Kings Rovers to get promoted. I guess in having somebody like Tim 𝐁𝐮𝐝, who's so vastly experienced, yourself at the club, I suppose having you guys there must have really helped deal with that pressure and that expectation, and obviously using that to rub off onto the players as well, so that they didn't start to feel the burden and expectation.
Yeah, well, nothing flaps Tim. He's a cool, calm. He's seen it all before, so it was a really good choice for what was needed at that time. The players enjoyed him. He was able to get the job done. I'm not sure I agree with everyone thought we'd get promoted, because we were a championship team that had to beat Super League teams to get promoted. It's not like it is now. It's not like just winning your league. We did it. We did a really good job. We beat Widnes at home. I still remember it. I think it was Ryan Shaw who went some distance to score, and we played some really tight, tough games in that. And I thought it was a credit to the whole club of being able to get that done, and the supporters too. They turned up in massive numbers that year to be able to finance it. Like it costs a lot of money to get promoted. Not only would it have cost me a lot of money, it would have cost without that fan support, the club never would have had a chance of being able to find it. So.
Yeah, and then we reached Super League again, but Tim Sheens unfortunately departs the club after not too long. You're kept on as assistant, and Tony Smith comes in to the club. Was it a difficult transition between Tim to Tony, and did Tony come in and rip everything up, or was it more of a continuity?
No, I was personally lucky that I already knew Tony. I spent some time with Tony when he was at Warrington. I wasn't coaching. I've known Tony even when I first came over and he was coaching Leeds. I spent some time when I was playing at 𝐁𝐿. I've known him and his family through Brian for a long time. I got on really well with Tony. Totally different characters. It's important. You learn so much from different coaches, the good and bad. Tony's biggest asset is that he spends a lot of time with people. And that, he really invests, time in effort areas in the game. I liked being obviously an assistant with Tony in that he lets you get on and do a lot of coaching as well and come up with plans and ideas. And me and Dave Hodge, had a lot of work to do, which was fantastic. And he did the other stuff, the managing stuff, which he really enjoys. So the first year was tough for Tony in that, obviously he had to play with what he had. You've got to remember that year, I think the year when Tim left, we had a lot of experienced players retire. Like I think Lee Jewett and 𝐁𝐿, and we had 1,000 injuries. And again, probably, some people that were at the back end of their career. And it's very hard sometimes when in a salary cap sport, when those players aren't able to perform at their best anymore and have to retire, that it's very hard to replace them. So we scraped through that year. And then obviously Tony went on and did a really good job the next year. Yeah,
and you left the club as well, James. Featherstone come in, offer you the head coach role. Was that something you were starting to aspire to take on that head coach role again?
I wouldn't say the head coach role. It was a hard decision for me as I loved the club and I loved working with Tony, just like I liked working with Tim. But I just felt that it was probably time for me to do something different, get out of Hull, so to speak, and go see what else was out there, and a different level, a championship, a team that was trying to get promoted. I had some experience in that from my time at Hull KR, and I just thought it'd be a good personal development for me. I could stay and be an assistant probably, for a long period of time. But, it was just the right time for me. And I just sensed that was the right time for me. Tony asked if I could, he could do anything for me not to go. But in saying that, he fully understood that why I was telling him that I wanted to go.
Yeah, and you've gone on to coach at Leeds Rhinos. Most recently, Fiji in the World Cup. I mean, what a fantastic experience that must have been.
Yeah, my second World Cup. I did France in 2013, now Fiji. Bizarre how I got involved this time. I got a phone call a week before it started nearly, and from Brian McDermott. I didn't know Brian that well other than coaching meetings before games, and he asked if I was able to do it, and work was really good in that they allowed me to change my timetable a bit here and there, and fantastic working with so many good players, a different culture and the way, they value certain things that, us in our country don't. It was a real eye-opening. I had a great time. It was great. And we played well too, we went within, a whisker of beating New Zealand in the quarterfinal, and I really enjoyed my experience there.
Yeah, wonderful. And, James, you reflect on your career at Hull Kingston Rovers, your career in rugby league in general. You're living in Hull, you're a British citizen. When you rewind and you go back to 2005 and that big decision to come over to East Hull and play rugby league, I suppose it opened up to the door to a lot more than just your time at Hull Kingston Rovers.
Yeah, that's what happens in life, doesn't it? Continually doors open, and you decide to take a path and another path, and I don't believe, I've never been one to scared of taking on a challenge and trying something different or new. ever since I was a kid. I've always tried that, and I'll probably continue to do that until I die. I'm lucky I've had some support, from my family here, of Laura and the kids, to be able to do lots of things that I've done. And I'm sure there's going to be some twists and turns again, but I've loved my time in Hull. I enjoy the people here. I enjoyed going to the game last Friday. First time ever I've been to a derby as a fan. And I took the boys, and we made a day of it, and I really enjoyed it. So who knows what will happen in the future? I'm sure it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I was going to say, James, just on that very quickly on the derby, are you able to sit and watch the game almost as a supporter, or are you analysing the players' movements and the tactics? Can you switch off totally?
No, I don't. I watch footy, but I don't watch. I find it hard to watch it as I wouldn't say as a fan. I'm always kind of watching it nearly as a coach and seeing what's going on and why people are doing that, and that's a bad play, and the coach wouldn't be happy with that. I just wanted to go and have atmosphere. I just wanted to go and soak it up and see what it was like, and allow my family to enjoy it as well. So many Fridays I've been working on Good Friday or playing that, it was good to sit on the other side of the fence and see how people enjoy it and what they do in town. It was an eye-opener. I enjoyed it. So Good Friday's like Christmas for me. I think it's the best day of the year. So I look forward to next year.
Yeah, and it's even better when you're able to put 40 points past your bitter rivals. James, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for giving up your time to speak to us on the Red Robin HeritageCast. I know a lot of fans were really looking forward to hearing about your time at Hull Kingston Rovers as a player and as a coach. And on behalf of the Rovers supporters, thank you for your contribution to our club.
No, anytime. Enjoyed it all. Keep supporting your team. I'm sure you'll have plenty of good times ahead, hopefully, this year. So look forward to seeing the progress.
Excellent. This is episode 21 of the Red Robin HeritageCast, which has been powered by Budget Size Auto Centre and 360 Chartered Accountants. Thank you for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure you subscribe and like the video. And thank you to everyone who's listening on the podcast. But for now, live, love, laugh and be happy.